Laurie, I am so excited to have you here. Although I shouldn't start this way because every time I see one of my friends here in Portugal, he makes fun of me because he's like, every time you start every podcast, you're like, oh my God. But it's true. I'm so excited that you're here. I'm going to give a little intro about who you are and then we'll jump right in. So, Laurie has spent most of her life working in the theater as an actor, producer, and the last 10 years, a fabric painter, costume distresser, and general bedazzler. She's been through my Mind Body Elevate program 3 times and seen remarkable changes utilizing many of her suggested dietary, mindset, and wellness techniques. Laurie, I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, I'm here. I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I'm really excited just to catch up and have this conversation with you. And I'll give a little bit of a backstory about Lori because you're like one of my favorite meet cute stories. How many years ago do you think this was in East Williamsburg?
Oh gosh, it probably has to be 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah, that's wild. 7 or 8
Yeah.
years ago, I had a Brussels Griffon puppy named Brewster, but we called him Bruce. And it was my first dog ever. So I was a terrible dog mom in the sense that I just gave him everything that he wanted all the time. And we were, I was an actress, so my schedule was all willy-nilly. So we'd take a lot of walks around the neighborhood. And one day we were walking near the pet store, and this very friendly woman shouted at me from down the street, "Is that a Brussels Griffon?" And I was like, "It is." And you can correct me if I'm misremembering because maybe they're different versions. But you're like, "I have one too. Do you want to come to my art studio and like meet my dog?" And I was like, "Absolutely, strange woman I've just met on the street who's very enthusiastic and seems very friendly. I will follow you into." And that was sort of funny because like that studio was sort of like almost like back alley vibes to get into it.
Oh, totally. Like I had the thought as I was like stalking you and your dog, like I have to meet this dog. And then I'm like, I sound like a crazy person inviting you. Like, do you want to come meet my dog in this weird like hole in the wall? But then I thought, oh, well, this woman obviously has no fear of stranger danger because she immediately says, okay, let's go. And then
I was like, sure.
Fell in love. Then they fell in love.
They did. It was really, really, really cute. Maybe we'll have to post a picture in the Instagram of them together. But they were best friends. And as like a new puppy, it was very nice for him to have Ellie Mae. Yeah. So then it was really fun because you had the coolest. I mean, you're transitioning. I mean, I guess we'll get to catch up on where because I don't really know where you are in it. But from my position, it seemed like you had the coolest job in the world. I would go into this big art studio and it's like this open floor plan, and they were always just making amazing costumes and painting like wings for the Victoria's Secret runway and like everything was. And as someone who loves an art and a craft, I would just secretly want to come and like help. But
yeah, you never knew what you were walking into.
No, and towards the end, every once in a while, you let like me paint something like for 2 seconds. I remember when you move studios, you're like, look. But I just thought you guys had the most fun jobs, and then I would look forward to walking my dog and seeing if there were days we were there and Bruce could play, and I could just like hang out and chat with you guys. And we've developed this really nice friendship.
Yeah, it was so nice to have like little midday just hangout breaks to feel like. Like connect with another person and like have puppy time. Oh,
I know. It was very,
come back.
I know. That was so nice. So tell us before we jump in a little bit just about where you're from, your background, where you got to where you are.
Well, I grew up in Missouri, right in the middle, went to college there and then finished college and knew I wanted to work in the theater. And so I started working at small theaters all around the country as an actor. And then...
Oh, did you like do summer stock or something like that?
I did summer stock. I did some dinner theaters. I did, the Great American Melodrama Theater, which was one of the weirdest experiences of my life. And then...
Why?
Because it's a place... I feel like I have to say it's in Oceana, California.
Okay.
And it's one of those like old time theaters where they literally served like peanuts for people to throw the shells on the floor and to like boo and hiss and cheer the like
Oh
heroes and
God.
villains during the show. It was so weird. And we had to work the concession stand at intermission. All of the actors did in
What?
costume. And whenever anyone gave us a tip, you had to ring a bell and you all had to start singing like a thank you for the tip song.
Oh God, this sounds awful. The things they put you through to
Yeah,
be an
it was
actor.
one of the weirdest experiences of my life. But it got me to California, you know? And then
How long did you do that for?
oh, not that long. Like probably
That's good.
3 months, I think
Okay.
maybe. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was crazy. And then someone had said, I always knew that I wanted to do theater, but someone had said, oh, you should go to LA and you're perfect for like the soaps. Go do that and it'll make it easier then to do theater elsewhere. Like they were just giving
'Cause
out roles.
That's hilarious that someone was like, yes, it is effortless to transition from The Young and the Restless to Broadway. Like that's the most backwards. That's very funny.
And you get off the airplane and they're like, hi, would you like to come be on our soap opera? Like, no, that's not how it worked.
I taped a lot for The Young and the Restless for a period of time where they kept like having me put myself on, and I was like, God, am I going to end up on a soap opera? I did not.
Yeah. I think I went in for General Hospital like 8 times and never. But
can't say I'm bummed. Can't say I'm not bummed.
It's okay. I think that worked out as it should.
Yes.
So yeah, I stayed in LA for 6 years. And then I had booked a film in New York. So I came here just randomly for like 4 days to shoot this tiny little indie that a friend was doing. And while I was in New York, I was like, why the fuck am I not here? Like, this is it. And so I went home back to LA and was like, no, I'm done. And I sold everything and moved to New York.
How old were you?
It was on my 30th birthday, like the day of my 30th birthday, which is a crazy coincidence looking back in so many ways. But that was it. And I stayed there for 17 years until
recently.
Until it wore me down.
Oh man, I know that life. Whew, it's exhausting.
It's exhausting. But I never had the permission, I felt, like I didn't have a Tony in my hand. I didn't have any of these things that I felt like I should. So I felt for so many years. I mean, I think I wanted to leave New York for about 7 years before I did.
4 for me, like 4 or 5 before I did.
Yeah. Well, you're smart.
Yeah. I took getting divorced. That was part of it.
I think that if I had have stayed any longer, I probably would have gotten divorced. So it
grinds on you. It really does.
It really does. And now I'm in Ridgefield, Connecticut, so much in part to our work together.
Yeah, you're like in Stars Hollow, basically, for any Gilmore Girls enthusiast, which makes me so excited. Actually, so I got to visit Laurie's house and neighborhood, and it's so beautiful and charming. But yeah, we kind of went through that process together, which was really amazing to watch you jump off a cliff, essentially, and create this really beautiful new life for yourself. So when I put out the call to action, essentially, I guess the second time around when I did my program, what made you want to sign up for it? Because Laurie and I were dog friends, right? I think he watched my dog once. We would walk our dogs, but we were dog friends. I don't think I went to your company party one year, but like we had not socialized. We had sort of a specific, lovely, but specific friendship.
Yeah.
So, and then I left New York and we hadn't probably spoken in a couple of years.
No, definitely. Because you went to California and then I sort of lost track of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same.
So it's interesting. You put out your call to action for your second program, and I had been seeing you on Instagram and these, reviews or whatnot coming in from the clients you'd work with.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me like there was some kind of magic there. Like, I'll admit, I jumped in fully expecting to be like, ooh, okay, I'm going to do this. And my friend is going to give me the answer. Like, it's just going to be handed to me. People talk about like, oh, I took Liana's program and now I'm a huge success and I'm booking jobs and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I'm like, okay, so it just comes with a mission. That's great. And I was feeling very stuck. Like I said,
Yeah.
I've been feeling stuck in New York for a long time. And
Yep.
I just didn't, there's no other word but stuck. Like
Yeah.
feet in cement, not making any motion, and to the point of feeling like I didn't even know how to attempt to make any motion. So
Yeah.
I wanted the magic pill, basically.
Yeah.
And
I mean, a lot of people do. I feel like a lot of people think that they're getting that and they get so much more. Like it's frustrating because they don't, but it's so much more than that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So much more. Like I've learned the beauty in the journey. I almost said struggle, but the struggle is what you start to shake off and the journey is what you're left with. And
ooh, that's really beautiful.
It's a really beautiful path. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy that I took that leap with you, my friend.
Oh, it's been quite a pleasure to have you, absolutely, and to watch this unfold. And I feel very lucky because, and we'll talk a little bit about this because it's sort of fun. So I've mentioned this. I need to maybe talk more about this or have like well, you're a little bit of an expert. I was going to say a human design expert, but Laurie and I are both reflectors. And I sort of turn my client, I always want to know because for me, I think it's very helpful because there's a lot of information about energy.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as that can sound very woo-woo, it's a real thing where like projectors reflect, we have very different energy. I see it. I get a lot of projectors, especially who are operating like manifestors and manifesting generators who are burnt out. And when I get them to see their design and I give them permission to really relax, they heal. Right? Like I've had people like with migraines and they were getting like MRIs and all of these brain scans when really it was like, oh, this is at the core a projector acting like a generator.
Yeah.
And okay. And maybe, well, we'll hop. The reason I bring it up is Laurie and I are both reflectors, which is 1%, 1 to 2% of the population. And we're kind of like a very weirdo kind of.
Yeah, we're weirdos. We're weirdo unicorns. Yeah.
We're weirdo unicorns. And it was interesting because my journey with human design, whenever something shows up 3 times in a row and like catches my eye, I'm like, okay, I got it. There's something about this I need to look at. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened with human design. I was like, I don't care because I'm not really into astrology. Like, I have my own sort of relationship to my spirituality through my healing journey, but like, I'm not like overly woo-woo in any way. So this kind of thing was like, and it came into my life when I was in the beginning of the pandemic, when I was at a crossroads between whether or not to continue with acting, because as soon as production stopped, I was like, there was just a sigh of relief. And I was like, whoa. And much like the not liking New York anymore, I didn't like acting anymore. Or I was just feeling really done with it. But I had such a hard time untangling myself from it. And then I had this other business that I really liked. And I was and that was kind of picking up because people were really struggling both, with mental and physical health because of the pandemic. And I remember I started looking into human design. They talked about reflectors are here to reflect back the health of a community or a population. And it was this funny moment of like, oh, maybe I do need to surrender to the truth that like acting has run its course and I love my business. And, I want to lean into that whole thing. But yeah, it's definitely, do you want to talk a little bit about, we sort of turned you on to it. Through.
Oh, you 100%. I feel like that's the first thing that I got out of. Well,
actually, let me back it up and talk about your chronic stomach aches. Let's like ground this in the human for a second.
Oh, okay.
Because like you didn't feel great when you were like, my body hurts.
Yeah. My body was fucked, basically.
What was going on physically for you?
I had stomach problems that I'd had my whole life. That similar to you, I'd been to how many doctors, and they always said, we don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'd been told
Yeah.
I had ulcers. I'd been told that I generated too much acid. I'd been told that my stomach generated not enough acid. I'd been told it could be gluten. I'd been told it was like all of these things, and nothing. Like it never
Yeah.
worked. I ended up in
Yeah.
the emergency room like for hours, and they basically told me I was like dreaming it. Like there's nothing wrong with you. There's
Oh
absolutely
God.
nothing wrong
Yep.
with you.
Yep. Yep.
Here's a $5,000 bill. And you're like, what?
Right.
Wait, hold on. What? And so I just felt so discouraged,
Yeah.
I mean, you start to question whether you are crazy or
Yes.
whether you're just hopeless. And it really aids in, it's such a feeder to depression,
Yes.
especially if you're also not feeling good in your space, and like everything just sort of starts to feel hopeless.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, you know, you as a reflector, I think I was trying to operate as a generator through all
Yep.
of this and feel like, but no, I just have to do more. And like, I see how much this person is doing. I see how much that person is doing. So obviously I suck because
Yes.
I don't have that. I don't have that hamster wheel. And sometimes I just want to sit down and not see a person for a
Yes.
week, and that obviously makes me wrong and bad,
Yeah.
and that's
Yes.
something wrong with me, and so my body is shutting down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then I also have a lot of chronic injuries or long-term injuries that were causing, pain in parts of my body, that I'm like, how does a stupid mistake cheerleading 30 years ago still fuck me up? Like, I'm an idiot. That's bad. I had family members telling me that I was too emotional, that I needed to
Yep.
just like get it together. Like, come on, put your big girl pants on. And so I think there were just a lot of voices everywhere in my life, my own and others, basically telling me, like, as a person, I was wrong. I was
Yeah.
doing it wrong.
Yeah. Ooh, that deeply resonates with me. And before we go further, just to clarify, so there are 5 types in human design: generators, manifesting generators, projectors, manifestors, reflectors. Most of the population is some kind of generator. It's like
Yes.
70, what, 5%?
Something like that, I think.
Yeah.
I'm bad at
And,
percentages.
and like the culture and society is built off of generators and their energy, and they have just energy they have to burn up throughout the day, and they sort of crash and burn at the end. It's like you got to use up that energy so they sleep well.
Yeah, they find
And
a project that like brings them joy, makes them happy, and they can like do it forever. Like they can
yes,
just go. And my husband is a hardcore generator.
yeah, mine
And
was too.
most of the people in my life that are most important are like I react well with generator
Yeah.
energy. And so apparently I was trying to keep up in a way that just wasn't sustainable.
Well, and New York is just such a hustle culture also. And
Yeah.
what you said in the human design thing, which I thought was really interesting, just now, was like you felt like you were wrong. You know what I mean? Like who you were as a person was wrong. And I felt the same way. Like I
Yeah.
always felt like I'm not doing it right, or and I mean, I think a lot of people feel that, but that was the one thing where that's where human design hooked me, right? Because I was like, whoa, this is like telling me really weird, idiosyncratic things about myself that are absolutely right and are now giving me an understanding and a permission and tools to like make better decisions and understand how to listen to myself and understand like the emotional part. Like we're both incredibly spongy, and like they talk about like us being able to amplify other people's emotions, right? So sometimes I would go into spaces as a child and I would feel things deeply, or I'd go in happy, come out sad, and be like, I have no idea why, and like want to start crying. And, things felt, and it was like, you'd feel crazy because you're like, wait, I was having a good day. And now I like ran into someone on the street. Now I feel angry or something after.
Yeah.
And it was like, this isn't mine. I didn't realize how much I was like filtering through everyone else's experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a big part of New York City for me.
Yeah.
I've come to realize, having stepped out of it now, I
Mm-hmm.
realized just how much being in a city with that much emotion from all the people,
Mm-hmm.
like it seems like, oh, you're in a place and you do your own thing. But for me, it was like I was absorbing,
Yeah.
the angry man on the corner and the
Yeah.
constant horns and the screaming and the, fuck that guy. And all of it was coming down on me. And I said to someone the other day, like at the end, I really felt like I was getting buried under this emotional rubble that was just
Mm-hmm.
coming down on me from all sides. And I had no idea. I didn't know that was happening because
Right.
I
Right.
didn't understand. And human design really gave me the the pieces of information that I needed. First of all, to go, I'm not broken.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
different.
Yes.
And it gave me a freedom to just feel like, oh, okay, like this makes sense. And it, like you said, the minutia that is
Mm-hmm.
so on the nose that I found from it.
What
And I
was one of the
also,
biggest surprises for you when,
oh,
like the sensitivity to spaces things, and even like even needing to move tables in restaurants? I was like, what? Like this is a thing?
for me, it was the decision making. That
Oh
was the
yeah,
first one that was like, oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
me. The
yeah.
fact that we don't we don't make decisions on the spot.
Right,
That like
right.
big decisions, we wait. It's best to wait a lunar cycle
Yeah.
because your thought of what the verdict of that decision will be completely changes on your mood at the time, which for us is so dependent upon space and like day and people and where we've been and all of these things coming at us.
Hmm.
And I thought, I mean, I can remember having a breakdown of epic proportions deciding between two colors to paint my bathroom at one point, like on
Yeah.
the floor sobbing because I felt like I had to make this decision right now and I couldn't do it. Like
Yeah, the
that
pressure
call to
piece
do
is
that.
so interesting. Like not
Yeah.
being able to deal with pressure.
Yeah.
Was that no, I had the hardest time. I mean, this is a bigger decision, but I remember like I was picking between two high schools, and it was like my parents wanted to kill me
Hmm.
because it was like it took me forever to make a decision. And the really beautiful thing about this is that I would just like spin my wheels and be anxious and think and stress out and stress out and stress out and stress out. And it's like now I just know that I don't know until I know.
Yeah.
And in the not knowing, and I think we all like all of this, and all of this can sound very basic, and all of this also is relatable to everyone to a degree, right? Like there's so many of us that are like empaths or highly sensitive where like you do have to really pay attention to your surroundings, and decision making can always, I mean, we all have moments of uncertainty, right? Where it's like, as long as I keep my head down and I really like, I do the things that make me feel good and I take care of myself, I trust now that the right answer will come when it comes. And again, everyone's got a different decision making process or authority, right? But I feel like that's on some level true for a lot of people as well.
Hmm. Yeah. And I feel like I've also been learning to trust my gut with people that I'm around too,
Mm-hmm.
which I never allowed myself the freedom of that. I'm like, oh, well, this person's in front of me. I guess I just have to deal with them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's not my fault that it makes me feel icky when now I know if someone makes me feel icky or like something doesn't feel right, then this isn't the person I'm meant to interact with.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And that's not
Uh,
a judgment on them. It's just something's not going to click here.
yeah, 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 yeah. Well, and so with all of the bringing it back to like the physical health issues, um, where was talk about the resolution there? Like, what was your experience with, and like, are you experiencing any of that stuff now?
Well, you know, there's all this talk that you always hear about being in your body. You need to be
Yeah,
in your body,
yeah,
everyone and I don't think I knew how to be in my body. I thought I was in my body
yeah.
because I felt a lot of pain and I
Mm-hmm.
felt a lot of discomfort
Mm-hmm.
and and I felt it hard. So that seemed to me like, oh, well, I'm in my body and it fucking sucks. So I actively want something to get me out of there.
Yes, yes, yes.
Which I couldn't get far enough out either.
Yeah.
So I think that the phrase like be in your body can be really disheartening if you don't know how. And I think a lot of working with your program is I learned how to listen to my body, which is very different. And I think that started really with the sugar detox.
Yeah.
With the whole food elimination sugar detox, which I was highly resistant to.
Yes.
In the beginning.
Most people are. Yeah. Most people are like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. Because I was like, well, you know what? I eat pretty good in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't really feel like this is a problem. I don't really feel like sugar is a problem. And I mean, I think calling it the sugar detox is a little.
I know I should not. I got it from a doctor who called it that. So I should maybe rename it something else.
Yeah, because it's a little misleading because it's so much more than that. It's so much, or at least in our little, our little brains. When I started out, when you said sugar detox, I'm like, well, I don't eat that much chocolate, like I'm not a sweets person. So this isn't my problem. This isn't what I need to focus on. When I feel like the change really started to me when I surrendered and did it.
Yeah. It's a consciousness tool. That's what I tell people this way. It is. It really is. Anytime you're slowing down, being really intentional about like what you're putting in or taking out of your body, and then listening. All it is, it's like, okay, we're doing a science experiment on your body. I know you've maybe done the Whole30 or something similar. I'm like, we want to look at this as a 10-day introspective journey. See what happens when you start to change and, modify what you're doing. How do you feel? How do you sleep? What are your thoughts? What are your cravings? Well, how's your digestion? How is your energy? How is your skin? Like from all of the human stuff to more of the thinking, feeling, being stuff. And you feel like that was, a doorway in, it sounds like.
A doorway in. And it was all of those things, as well as it put me sort of on the spot to really just focus on taking care of myself for those 10 days instead of like, okay, I have to make sure that like whatever we're fixing, like my husband would like as well, or that I'm using whatever's in the fridge or like, like all of these other things, which had been putting it outside of me for those 10 days. I focused on me and what I felt like and what I was putting in my own body, which was it sounds so silly and simple, but was a huge shift from my general mindset. Yeah. Yeah. And I learned, first of all, I learned that nightshades are a problem for me, which again, I had been pouring tomatoes in my body every day because they're healthy, right? Like that's a healthy choice. Right. So I learned the things I needed to stop. And I also, I learned that things like my body actually feels better if I have a little bit of like carbs to run on. I'm a sturdy German girl. We like potatoes and bread. Like I need a little bit of that. I also have learned when I'm having too much of that, what that does to me as well. Yep. But without doing the 10 days, I feel like there were all these like little signs that I never would have noticed or paid attention to or knew what they meant. Yeah. And that was a huge first step for me.
And what happened with the stomach issues?
Well, I don't have them anymore.
I knew that, but I feel like we needed to celebrate that. Yeah. That's very exciting.
I haven't had like, it's so interesting. There was, but like 2 days ago, I was having like a weird pain and it's interesting that your body remembers these things. And I had this pain and it brought on like such a like heavy sweat anxiety attack because it was like, no, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. I don't want to be there again. Why is this here? And I was able to just sort of sit and calm myself and be like, oh, you know what this is? You haven't drank enough water in the past 3 days. And so here's what's happening. And I could, in myself, figure it out, which felt like such a huge win for being literally debilitated for years with stomach issues. Yay.
I love that. Well, and that's like the first step into being, like you talk about, like being in your body. That's the first step to being in your body, right? Where it's like, if it doesn't hurt, it's easier to be inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so why did you decide to come back?
Well, it went so well the first round. And we had just a really beautiful and amazing group of women and men. We had our solo man in my first group.
Chris.
Hi, Chris. But it was such a beautiful group of people. And I felt like I was learning as much from them as I was from you. Just because it was like watching people with completely different struggles than me and seeing them like manage and step their way through it over those 12 weeks. That, I mean, I love you, but the second group, I came back a lot because a lot of them were coming back, and they felt like such a community that had become so important to me. And so instrumental in supporting each other and their growth that so many of us came back for round 2 that I jumped in. And then it was in round 2 when a lot of my life went right into the toilet with my living situation, which was bananas. I think the first call of round 2, I was having to take the call from inside my car during a blizzard because my neighbor had just burned his house down and forced us out of ours like 3 days before.
Right, because there was like smoke and all kinds of damage. Yeah.
So everything had gone in the shitter, and I was like, man, I thought everything was going so well. Again, thinking that I had taken the magic pill is what I think at the end of it. Like, okay, I feel so good. I'm starting these techniques, but I think they weren't really ingrained in my body. And so then we jumped in for the second round, and I feel like that's when really the deep, hard stuff started happening. Yeah.
It was so crazy. It was so crazy because you were talking more and more about how you were feeling exhausted by New York and you were unhappy and you weren't happy in your living space anymore. And the fire happens. And then your other neighbor on the other side, right? During this time, right?
Yeah.
You like drilled a hole through the wall into your apartment.
Oh no, that was the same neighbor. That was the same neighbor that burned it down.
Oh, okay.
Before that, he had been, there was a lot there. He was apparently like a known bad guy by the police, and he was banging on our walls. He thought someone was living in the wall between our brownstones. And
Brooklyn.
He like was looking for him, like dismantling the wall on his side. And then he drilled holes through, like from his side into our side, which I like one day opened a cabinet and I looked in and I was like, oh shit, I shouldn't be able to see that. And
that's terrifying. That's like the stuff of horror movies.
Yeah, it really was. And no one would help us. Like the police were like, there's nothing we can do. And
you're like, he's breaking into our apartment through the wall.
Yeah, we were told basically that unless he directly brandished a weapon while threatening us, like in our faces, or if he like actually physically hurt one of us. That was the only way that we could do anything. But the rest of it, there was nothing that they could or would do. And so it was just, again, that feeling of helplessness. And then it just kept building and building like he would tell my husband things that he'd be like, oh, I heard you guys talking about this, because he could he had holes in our apartment.
Oh
So
my God,
we
that
were
is
in our
so
place, and we would
creepy.
have to whisper or like go outside and like talk quietly if we
No.
didn't want him to hear. Like it was terrifying. And then he burned the place down, and ours got so much smoke damage that then we were forced out for 2 months. So
Hmm.
we were just floating between like hotels and Airbnbs with 2 dogs, and like just literally not really knowing where we were going to live the next week
Yeah. Well, and it
until
was
it all got
interesting
tough.
because you were really resistant to leaving that place, even
I
though
really was.
you weren't happy there anymore. And it just felt like you were getting physically pushed out. And like, we believe what you want to believe, but it was like the universe is like, Laurie, you don't like this. Like, I'm going to make it really hard for you to live here.
Yeah, except the universe wasn't doing it in that volume of voice. The universe was screaming at me, like, flashing lights in my face. And I still, which I've come to realize, I didn't feel like I deserved to get out of
Yep.
that.
Yes. That's what, it was really interesting because you were really, really resistant to the truth of the situation, what you actually wanted. And you had a
Yeah.
really, really hard time asking for your needs to get met.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt that that financially it was an impossibility. I
Hmm.
felt like, uh, sort of how we talked about earlier, that sort of feeling of being like if I leave New York, I'm a failure,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like this societal thing about the city. Like, why would anybody ever leave New York? It's the greatest city in the world. Well, for some people it is. And for some
Hmm.
people, it's a living shit show. So I was one of those people, but I was just much more absorbed in the voices coming at me instead of the voice in me, which knew
You
what I
had no
wanted.
connection to it when
Zero,
I met
zero.
you.
Yeah, zero.
None. None.
Yeah.
And how,
And no, go ahead.
no, you know, go, you go, you go.
Um, you starting to meditate is really what helped me get in touch with that, which also was so hard
Yeah.
because I didn't feel like I could do it right. I didn't feel like I could do it
Mm.
correctly. Like
Hmm.
I couldn't find like sitting quietly for 10 minutes. There was too much outside stimulation. There was too much whatever. And guiding meditation helped. But then, in our group, in that
Hmm.
fabulous group, we
Hmm.
talked a lot about the idea of doing things badly.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Fuck it up.
whether it was writing badly or like
Yeah.
dancing badly or whatever it
Yep.
was. And I really leaned into that one. And I was like, well, you know what? I bet I can meditate like shit. I can do that really badly.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
so that kind of, again, like cracked open this door that was like, but you're still doing it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it then
yeah.
started to become easier. I'm still not great at it. I'm still
I
not a
mean,
fabulous.
I mean, what does that even mean though, right? Like, it's such a
Right.
personal practice. Like, that's like, I'm still not great at, I was going to say showering, but that's not right at all.
I
Yeah,
hope
I'm
not.
like,
I hope
no,
it's not the
nope,
same.
you can be good and bad at taking showers. That's like an obvious thing. I'm a little slow
Yeah.
today.
The being
But
bad at it though allowed me to make it personal, you
yes.
know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and into what it means to me, which a lot of time is just breath work and
Yeah.
breathing
Yeah.
and taking like 30 seconds. But then also there are those times, where I do just need to like sit and be quiet and like feel whatever's under my hands. Sometimes that's
Hmm.
the best thing for me. Or,
Hmm. Hmm. Well,
it all
it's like
changes.
anything else. It's like your diet. It's like what type of, practice do you need meditation wise or
Yeah.
otherwise, right? Like all of it.
Yeah.
And I really like I remember I sort of brought this with from improv days when I used to do stuff at UCB. They would always like in the very beginning of a class they'd be like, "Okay, you guys do the worst improv ever." And it
Mm.
was so funny because often it was not that bad. and people would have to squash down their good instincts. And I just remember that being like, oh, all of a sudden we're all free. Right.
Yeah.
And like, that's what, for all of you, it's like, well, how do I get you to slow down and honor yourselves? So to listen, and how do I get you to free up your ideas around your limitations?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's healing. And sometimes that's, it's different for everyone, which is why, going back to why you love the group so much, because I was just doing individual for years coaching, except for I was teaching classes at this like conservatory. And I really loved the classes because people would come in and they'd talk about what worked and what didn't. And in community, we heal faster, right? In community, when we commit to something, it's more meaningful. We show up for each other. So when I started doing the group program, you saw that people were really committed to the calls or to showing up because it meant that like you're supporting someone else that you cared about now's growth journey, right?
Yeah.
And that is that's incredibly powerful. And when you start to see people, like the whole mirror neurons thing, right? Where you see someone being able to do something, you then believe that you can do it.
Yeah.
And like, that is part of the why the group work, I think, is incredible. It's incredible. And it's so interesting though. And I think one of the beautiful examples of doing that kind of work is everyone is so different. There's this beautiful dichotomy of there are these common threads, right? That we all can, everyone wants connection. Everyone wants to feel good. Everyone wants to feel free and happy, all those things. But on the other side, like, there are so many weird things that certain people need to feel good, right? And like, the more you give people freedom to be like, I don't know, I need to take a shower every night before bed. Not that that's weird. Again, why do I keep talking about showering? I don't
showers
know.
Today.
I had one. I'm still thinking about it. I'm not sure. But I'm like, what are my funny habits? Apparently, I have a real affinity. I take a lot of showers. I don't know. Like with stress, I take more showers.
Interesting.
So many. Yeah, I like to wash the day off. I feel like there's an energetic. I go in. It's like almost meditative, where I like a long day. I just like literally like deep breath. Picture like the water like washing away the day, or like pulling all of like the energy down the drain. But I think I just used to be a mermaid. Also, swimming is like my favorite thing ever. Okay, this is a tangent we didn't mean to go on. But no, starting to see all of the little things and people giving themselves permission to, be empowered, to heal, to feel better. Like, you're like, oh crap, I can do this too. And women, I mean, everyone has a hard time, but especially women. Like the idea that you're like, I can spend 10 days just paying attention to my body and caring for myself.
Yeah, I think the freedom and the permission are like the biggest things, but also to see somebody else do it made me feel like, I think I often deal with things feeling like, oh, I'm not equipped for that. I haven't read enough books on it. I don't have the right tools. I don't have, the correct pen to write in my journal. I don't have this. And to see someone else in a week be like, oh, I tried this. I just, like laid on my floor or laid in a ball, whatever. And it really did something. It was a permission that someone else was like showing you their little path to be like, it doesn't have to be that hard. Yeah. It doesn't have to be as hard as you're making it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was, it's just a little gateway drug.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess I'd love to know some of your biggest takeaways from our experiences together. I mean, not that we haven't just, we could even continue on the house journey. Like, it was pretty amazing to watch you suffer, figure out why you were suffering, know that you did not want to live there anymore, that it was literally making you sick and feel crazy. And it's so interesting how we cling to things because we are afraid, even when they are so bad for us, right? Like, we almost like grab onto the suffering. And then we watched you.
What's that phrase? Like, the devil is better than the one you don't.
Right. And you show up at these calls in tears, so unhappy and stressed out and dysregulated and feeling physically and mentally bad about this living situation, yet really clinging to it still and feeling so afraid. And I just remember me being somebody, I'm like, you don't want to be there anymore, Laurie. This is not good for you. And you're like, you weren't ready, which is beautiful. You know, everyone does everything on their own time. But it was really interesting to have this situation really highlight where you really didn't feel deserving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you had to overcome that and learn how to ask for your needs to be able to create this new beautiful living experience. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, that is a whole journey that is a definite path that I'm still like hardcore walking.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I work as an artist. I work in the theater. I don't have any money. Like, there's no money there. Like, how would I ever be able to expect more than what I had right now? Which, you know, I also was clinging to the idea that like when we found our apartment, it was exactly what I wanted. You know, like,
oh, that is such a beautiful thing you just pointed out, because so many of us, this is the thing that I want. This is what I've always wanted. I'm going to hold on to it no matter what, even as life changes and I evolve, which causes then suffering. Continue. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. It was, you know, like, oh my God, we found at such like a cheap price, we found a 3-bedroom or a 3-floor brownstone in Brooklyn. Like
with a yard?
With a yard. And how many times had I said out loud, like, I just want to work in Brooklyn. Like if I could just be in Brooklyn full time, if I didn't have to go to Manhattan anymore, you know, and then we had find this place, and this was exactly the place I wanted, you know, it was. And so there was that feeling deep inside of like, but what if I give this up and move to something else and that doesn't make me happy either? Then that's, again, I'm wrong and I'm fucking everything up because I don't know. Yeah. And I was afraid of the I don't know.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And do you feel less afraid of the I don't know now these days, just in general?
The I don't know has become my best friend.
Yay!
Like, I just, my general answer is, I don't know. Like things fall apart, and what used to would be cause such severe dysregulation in me and such sadness and such depression and has just become like, okay, well, I don't know what's coming. Something else is coming then, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of freedom.
Yeah. I think that is one of the biggest things I try to impart on people is like, well, if not this, then something better. Like we all are just convinced that like, this is the best I'll ever have. I'm like, what if this is the new baseline? Right?
Yeah.
What if it's not the best you'll ever? What if we just go up from there? So if you don't get something similar to this, it'll be something better and we won't settle for anything else. And that happens, right? Maybe there's a dip, maybe in the growth journey, it's not exactly, but if you show up and listen and you do the work and, you know, you're connected to yourself and you make the decision that make the most sense for you, I never see a situation. And, you know, this is the hard part about the work and why people come back. And once you start to become more connected to yourself, more conscious, you start listening in ways that you've been numbing and avoiding and you haven't been feeling good. Because again, so many people come to me feeling stuck or feeling disconnected, right? They don't know, right? And then it's so scary to look inside and start to learn, right? Because what happened to you, and we've seen this happen with people's relationships or careers or both, where it's like you come into this process thinking there's a magic pill. You just want to feel better. You want to lose 20 pounds. You want to whatever. You want to be happier. And initially there is almost like a crash and burn, right? Where like things do get worse because all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have just been putting tape on the bottom of this leaky boat instead of patching it. And the water keeps coming in, I put more duct tape on it, right? Or it's like, no, we're going to open it up. We're going to take all the things out. We're going to rearrange them. We're going to get rid of the ones that don't work. We're going to give you tools. We're going to, patch up some stuff and put it all back in a better way. But that takes some time. And I think that people, it's funny because I'm continually in this process of like, what do I do for people? Like, what is this work? What is this? And whatever, any reflections you might have are always welcome. And as you know, as a reflector, as that's something you're good at. But it's just interesting because it is this ability to listen and look inside and not be afraid. Because I think that we're also afraid of the mess and the pain and the fact that like the job isn't right anymore, the marriage isn't right anymore, that you do want the kids or you don't want the kids, or whatever it is. And so many of us just spend our lives avoiding that, right? And having the chocolate and the alcohol and running as fast as we can. Like New York's a beautiful example of where it's very easy because it is so loud that you do not need to look inside at all. You do not need to see what's not working. You do not need to honor your truth, which may be uncomfortable.
And the longer you don't listen to your truth, like the quieter it gets.
Yes, you're
where that voice is like just this tiny whisper that I couldn't hear it.
Right, and you don't trust it, and you have no skills. Right, it is a skill. It's a muscle. That trust muscle is a real thing. Being able to listen to it, and it's interesting because people will stay with me for a couple of years and come back because I unfortunately make you see things about yourself that you weren't ready to look at. Because at the end of the day, if you want to heal your relationship with your body or food or whatever you do to numb out, and that can be, it's interesting. I'm starting to call more and more people into my life who that's their thoughts more than anything else. That it, you know what I mean? It can be sugar, it can be shopping, and it can be your brain and the way you think and the way you talk to yourself and what you believe and what you believe about yourself. Yeah. And I start to give you tools to untangle that a little bit, right? Because that's where we get in the way and we stay disconnected, or we stay in suffering, or we keep ourselves small, or we keep ourselves in the comfort zone. And what you've done and what we watched you do in that second session, like you moved out. You took a leap of faith in a town you didn't know, and you bought a house in Connecticut, and you were terrified.
Terrified. Absolutely.
Because it was on a whim. It made no sense. You both worked in New York, but like you had to listen to this deep listening that you were going to end up sick and feeling horrible if you didn't.
Yeah. Oh, I fully believe that New York would have killed me. It would have killed me to stay there. Absolutely. Yeah. Without a doubt. And we had looked for so long, which again, I didn't understand, because, right, you're supposed to just be able to manifest it. You just manifest it. You just think about what you want and it shows up. That's what manifesting is, right? That's it.
Right. Yeah. It's just there.
Yeah, it's not. And I feel like we'd looked for so long and nothing was there. And so I was also in that place of like doubting my own thoughts and my own like feeling of like, no, I have to do this. And I'm like, well, if I have to do this, then where is it? I don't know. I don't know how to work harder, when in actuality, the answer wasn't working harder. It was just like following the breadcrumbs. Yes. And when we did find our house, I walked in and I was like, oh, this is my house. Like, and everything was really fast and fairly simple from that point, which also made it not make sense.
Yes. Yes.
Which made it feel like, wait, it shouldn't be like this. Obviously, the house must be on a haunted Indian graveyard, and we're all going to get sucked into the television. Something has to be horribly wrong. It can't just, happiness doesn't just work out,
Oh, right. And there's the emotional ceiling you're hitting there too, right? Yeah.
And I also want to backtrack for a minute. Not knowing, the whole I don't know. Yeah. Which there was, I think it might have even been in the last workshop we did. I was talking about like desire to like grow and move forward in my like work situation. And you said to me, you go, maybe it's just not time to know. Yeah. I never knew that was an option. I never knew that was I didn't know that was a choice to not know. Yeah. I thought that you had to know, whether it was, listening to yourself or what you were given or like what you were working towards or whatever. I
Yeah.
didn't know that there was the possibility to just not know and lean into that and see how things come, which,
Yeah.
especially as reflectors, is how
Yes.
we're meant to operate,
Yes.
to
Yes.
not push it, to not be like trying to force things and the next right thing will show up.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that was like a whole game changer in realizing that that was an option, which
Yeah.
then by turn, by not knowing, piqued my curiosity in the world
Yes.
in a whole
Yes.
new way.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's brilliant what you just said right there. Brilliant. Because you weren't
It's
making
like,
yourself wrong and you
I
weren't
wasn't
putting
making
pressure
myself,
on it and you weren't scrambling to do what everyone else is doing. It's like, I don't know. How do I figure out how to know? What
I
would
don't
be
know.
interesting?
Maybe it's in this book about breathing. Maybe it's there. Oh, wait, maybe it's in the somatic therapy workshop. Wait, and all of these like little curiosity hits along the way, then just be like, it's like fitting like little Jenga pieces back in instead of pulling them out. Be like,
Yeah.
oh, here's a tiny thing from this that I can take that works for me, which is totally
Mm-hmm.
different than what works for the person next to me. And
Mm-hmm.
oh, wait, I
Mm-hmm.
learn about this, which then leads me to this, which it's, it just sort of has changed a whole life experience by
Yeah.
not, I don't know, not knowing.
Yeah. 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 I mean, and you're a really beautiful example of what I'm starting to see with my clients, right? Like so many people come to me suffering and in survival, right? Like I just can't take this one more second. I don't know. I can't figure it out. My body hurts, my stomach, whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
like I take you, from survival into like healing and health, right? There's like a baseline there. And then if you stay the course, we go into life optimization. So
Yeah.
I watched you. You were like physically suffering. You that first round, you got better in your body, and then that once we got you feel in your body, you realized how much you did not, how your environment was adding to right you feeling poorly. You
Yeah.
got yourself out of that situation into your dream home essentially,
Yeah.
and then the third time it was like, okay, so we fixed the body, we fixed the environment. Now it's like, what do I have to give? What do I want to put out into the world? What do I want to create? And that's a really beautiful, but also scary space to be in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that so many of the things, and this is why cultivating the listening is so important. And this is why we start with the physical stuff, things like sleep and moving and all of those things that will get you in your body and make you feel like you can inhabit it without suffering and feeling stomach aches and upset. Because once you're present and you can be in that experience, that's when we do get that information. We do that, get that knowing. And it's so funny because it's like, I toe the line with this stuff. And I always worry that I sound too woo woo. And like, I do maybe, right? For some
Never.
people, I definitely probably do. But like, there are both parts of it, right? And there is that very human part of it where like if your physical body is not okay, you're never gonna be able to hear that little gentle voice because you're always going to be trying to heal or trying to fix and so many of us keep ourselves in that state so we don't have
Mm-hmm.
to look at the fact that our marriage isn't working or whatever it is. And then once we get you in there, it's we we're taught this idea, right? Of that, like you go to school and then you go to college and then you get a job and then you get married and there's this like linear path. No
There's a
one has
right
that.
answer.
Yeah, there's no right answer. There's only
There
your
is
right
none. It
answer.
doesn't exist.
There's your
Yeah.
right answer, and that's going
Yeah.
to change all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's so interesting because so many of these tools, it's like, yes, it's health, but in service of how do we create the most beautiful life for you? Like, how do we
Mm-hmm.
uncover? And I always talk about it being like a treasure map, right? We all have this sort of buried treasure map inside of us, and it's up to you to find that treasure. And we have to mine what's deep within us to know what's okay, where, oh, you've got to take, X marks the tree. We got to go over to look at the tree and see what's in there and learn the next thing. And then we got to go to the riverbank and see what's over there. And so much of what I try to do for people, which I think you're exemplifying beautifully, and like you're in this really interesting liminal space. And it would be fun to talk to you in like 6 months or a year where you've surrendered finally, right? To the idea of you being right or wrong, to you being wrong, especially, or being undeserving, right? You're healing all that stuff you've dealt with. That was what was inside when we looked in. Ooh, I'm not deserving. Ooh, I'm not good enough. Ooh, like all of these things that so many of us can relate to, right? And then once we clear that out and think like, ooh, maybe I can do whatever. And then it's like, what is that? That's so
Yeah.
scary.
Whatever's really big.
Right. Oh my God. And then it's like we want to look and it's like, oh, I could do this whole other huge thing over there, or this or that, or start a company or whatever it is, move to another country. And then we're paralyzed, right? Because how do I do that? It's too big. It's too scary. And so much of what this work becomes is, how do you just keep it really small, keep it really present, be in the moment, and listen? And then trust that those whispers that you get to go to that party, to go to the art opening, to stay home, to watch that YouTube video, to like, two people left the same book with me that visited me, this fiction book, and I never read fiction. I'm going to have to read it, right? You know what I mean? Like stuff like that. Or it's like when we start to notice these things and know that like there's just, life will give you hints and clues, but so much of it has to do with like your connection to yourself and your truth. And that's the only compass that's going to lead you in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. And giving, I think it's really important, as I've learned, to allow time.
Yeah.
Like there's so much, like you hear the call that like, oh, this isn't right where you are. But that doesn't mean that in 5 minutes, I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen in 5 minutes, but like there's so much to learn in that space between.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's, I mean, again, especially as a reflector, like learning to slow it all down and like, not just keep going on the adrenaline rush of it, because at least for me, that adrenaline wheel will inevitably crash me right into a brick wall, you know, which then leads to more frustration as to like, oh no, I did it wrong. I did it wrong.
Yeah.
Which in actuality, it's just like, just sit back a little bit and give it a little time and space and breathing room, and the right thing will happen.
And at this point where we are culturally, you know, it's a powerful act of defiance to slow down and give yourself that space, right? That's one of the scariest things. And I started coming up against it here because again, I mean, the whole thing about moving here was sort of the same as your house. Like the first night I spent in Lisbon, I didn't even like my Airbnb. I was like, it was a random night. I just stepped onto the street and I had this like electric feeling and this real sense of like excitement about this. And like throughout the month I spent here last, because I was with you, I was in this space of really powerfully not knowing where I even wanted to live. Like that felt really crazy to me. And it was so terrifying because I always had a very, very, very clear path. Like I was going to move to New York and be an actress. And then I was going to start this other company. And then, okay, I was going to get divorced. I was going to move to Los Angeles. I was going to build out both parts of my career. Oh shit, I'm going to let go of acting. Okay, I'm going to build out this. And then I was like, well, where am I going to live? And oh, I'm going to live in London and I'm going to have this relationship. And that's going to be it. And it was the first time in my life where I was like, well, not the first, but the biggest time probably in my life where I'm like, oh, I don't know. Like, I really don't know. And I'm very scared and no one else is I'm alone in this. So I'm the only one who has to figure it out. And it was really interesting that the Lisbon thing unfolded much like your house did. I'm like, this is too easy. I'm getting a visa, like very easily doing all of these things. This makes no sense to me. And really trusting and listening. And then finally getting here. And as someone who is very sensitive to her environment, this is the antithesis of New York City. It is a small town.
Yeah.
The pace of life is different. How people show up in the world is different. And I, for the first couple of months, just was spinning my wheels, like running around like a crazy person, not understanding why I didn't have the same motivation to work and not allowing myself to acknowledge the burnout of the last, I don't know, almost 20 years of my life.
Yeah.
Especially 5. And it was so scary. And like poor Claire has been on so many calls with me where I'm just like crying about like, is it okay to slow down? Is it okay to give myself a break? And I finally just had to do it. But then I had to like keep reminding myself that it was okay that I was doing it. Because I always, for me, right, and I know I tell this to you guys a lot, it's like, not only are we looking inside for like what, or feeling around sometimes, because that's all it is, like, depending on what type of person you are, but like, what is that next right step? Like, if we don't know what is just the next right thing that's going to like feel aligned or feel good or feel relaxing or calming, or, like the Martha Beck thing, the head, the really do you have a desire, right? Does it pull on your heart? Does it feel like peace in your gut? Does it feel like freedom to you? Feeling around for that next tiny right step when you really don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And oh no, I was on a build and I lost my train of thought. I love it. I love it. Okay. Where was I going with that? That does not happen very often. This is what happens when you stay out late going dancing with your gay friend from college. I'm very good about not doing stuff like this before podcasts, but I hadn't seen him in 4 years. And
Sometimes
it
you
was like
gotta.
the only night. And I was like, you know what? I'm going for it. I had a little bit of a rough week, had a breakup week. So we're like leaning into like what feels good for us.
Mm-hmm.
But, in that moment, giving yourself that permission to lean in and listen and do the next right thing, knowing that like it's often not going to make sense, right? When you are
Right.
making a big shift, when you are doing a big transition, when you are changing jobs or leaving the security of a great relationship or environment, it makes no sense. So like we have to have this weird sense of trust in ourselves and allow the I don't know, and allow us to jump off of those cliffs, and allow us to continue to move forward. Oh, I know exactly what I was going to say. I talked myself back into it. But for me at this point, feeling around for that next right step, sometimes it's like, well, your brain is like, you should do this, right? This would be the right thing. This would be like the business minded thing to do, or this is what you used to like to do. And now I'm like, what's the scary thing?
Yeah.
Not the scary thing like I'm going to die, but like what's the thing that I am terrified to do? And it was so interesting because when I really got present to what that was this summer, it was like rest more, work less. And I was like, I'm so afraid to trust that's going to be right. I'm so afraid. But I'm like, but if I know that I make no fear-based decisions anymore, that was like my promise to myself after my divorce, I would not do anything based in fear. The other part of it is I really try to do the next scary thing. Mm-hmm. So is it letting go of something? Is it, slowing down? Is it taking a new class? So for you in this moment, in this in-between space, put your hand on your heart for a second and close your eyes. And everyone do this, right? And just like we started, take 5 deep breaths and just like get really in your body. And without opening your eyes or overthinking, what is the scariest thing you could do, right? To step out of your comfort zone in this moment, to move towards clarity. And maybe it's a couple of things, maybe it's one. First thing that comes to mind is always the right thing. And it can be so tiny and so simple. And it also can be totally nonsensical in relation to what you're trying to figure out. And when you have that, open your eyes. And if you're open to sharing, what the lack of clarity is and maybe what the scary thing is, feel free. And you also don't have to.
The funny thing is that the first thing that comes to mind is you're doing it because
I know you didn't want to do this.
I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do this. And everything about it, when you asked me, my body went, oh, no, no, no. Oh, no, 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 no.
Why do you think, why was this scary?
There's a long time in my life when committing my words or my thoughts to some type of permanent medium or semi-permanent medium or whatever, whether that was writing them, whether that was recording them or whatever, it's very scary. It's very scary because those can then be brought back and used against you, you know? And I had instances of like, you know, family or partners or whatever, like reading my journal or like reading these things, and like my thoughts were then turned against me. And so so this seemed terrifying to me. And also, you know, when you were like, oh, like you've been a success story, and I'm like, well, why am I still such a fucking hot mess? If I'm a success story, this feels wrong. Like, obviously you're seeing the wrong thing, which I think for a long time in my life, I didn't register the idea of growth. Yes. And I thought that change, I only saw it as change and not like change because you're growing or outgrowing something, or like your path veered. And change, again, kind of like I mentioned earlier, seemed bad to me because these things that I wanted so much that I got, that then when I didn't want them anymore, felt bad. And I think the same thing with ideas and with words, you know, like just because I say something, it felt incorrect that I could say something right now and then think something different in 2 years, you know, if somewhere down the line. I never took into account the idea that, oh, you can learn more and you can experience things, and you can also just outgrow and shed a skin. Yeah. And so, you know, as I've been trying to figure out my next step, career-wise, life-wise, whatever, I feel this thing about like finding my voice again and feeling confident in speaking about things. Even my own experience, I don't think I felt confident in talking about. So, so that's why I was just like, well, you know what? Fucking do the podcast. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, somebody's going to come light my house on fire. If anyone's listening, please don't come light my house on fire.
We didn't even tell them where you live. Don't even worry.
Good.
She actually lives in Stars Hollows. Guys, go try to find it. That's exactly where she lives.
Yeah.
Near the music store. like trying to think of landmarks. There's a gazebo. Yeah. She can see the gazebo from her living room. No, but you are a profound success story. You know, you healed your relationship to your body, understand what you needed to eat. You found your dream home and got yourself out of a situation that you were very stuck in. And now you're sort of like, that's the thing though about life. And it's like, we get to the next step and then there's more steps every single time. So how can we enjoy, oh, here we are now. And like, how can we have these moments of looking back? Like you 2 years ago, looking at your life now, how impressed would she be?
Blown away and unconvinced still that it was possible.
Right? And I think that like, I love having you on because growth and life is never clean and beautiful. And it always feels a little bit messy. And I have to remind myself all the time, I'm like, look at where you are now, when I feel really like in pieces, because moving here and really starting over my life, it has felt that way. And a couple of times it's like, what did I do? Was I running away from something? It's like, no. But we can hold both, right? That you are an incredible success story and the journey that you're on is amazing, and you still continue to grow and look for things, and that you aren't there yet because we never get there because there is death. Yeah. So why are we running so fast towards it? Why are we ignoring the moment? Why are we not enjoying every part of it, right? And I think that, again, culture in the US too, it's like, okay, you're going to get the money so you can buy the house and have the shit and the car and the stuff. And then you can be happy that you can retire and be on vacation. That's never, ever, you know what I mean? Like, that's such a difficult way to look at life because you're putting off happiness forever and ever, where it's like, how is every moment for me and interesting and unique and beautiful? And how can we look at everything that's showing up? Because, life shows up through the lens in which we choose to see it, right? We have so much more control over how we experience life than we realize. Yeah. And if we can just sit there and be like, let's just assume everything's for our greater good. Let's just assume everything is for us, for our growth, to push us to be these versions of ourselves that our souls are aching for, right? To create these things that we love so much. How can we just enjoy every single part of that and look at every heartbreak and every, like, I am in sort of a weird space coming out of like this 3.5 month thing that was really intense emotionally and lovely and beautiful and hard.
Mm-hmm.
And feeling, kind of going into it being like, this is maybe not exactly what I'm looking for, but like I'm being drawn into this because I don't know why. So I usually just like let go. And as things were shifting or coming apart, or, there was a moment last weekend where I was like, oh, I feel so stupid. Like, how did I let myself do this again? And even in that moment, I couldn't really believe that, because I could look and see I learned I got really clear on what my needs were. I got to practice stating those needs, right? I got to learn to trust myself more and feel better, out my shadow and these parts of myself that I didn't feel good about. And it was like, whoa, nothing is ever wasted if we can look, right? None of it is. And every time you look back at these in-between spaces where I'll have these moments here where I'm like, where am I putting my business into? And like, who am I calling in? And what, there were years where I was dying to just be alone. Like the idea of like having my own apartment in like a really fun city where I had freedom and I could cultivate community, do whatever I want. Dying for that.
Yeah.
Why am I getting out of this so fast? And like those moments in my acting career where like I didn't have a lot going on and I was able to do the artist way, or, you know what I mean? Go to the MoMA in the middle of the day by myself. And I look back on those moments so incredibly fondly, but I felt exactly how you do now. So how can we use this beautiful in-between space as also a gift? How can we view it that and also enjoy it instead of just fighting it?
Yeah. And I think also the looking back is such a gift that I don't feel like I ever utilized until, God, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, when I like took the time to like look back, and I feel like I've lived more lives than I can even count.
Yeah.
But that again felt shameful. Like, oh, I should have found the one person and settled down and be 3 kids deep by now. And, the one path. When I took the time to like look back and think about it, I was like, holy shitballs. I did manifest all those things. These things that I said out loud and I put the universe, I had that. And then moving on to the next thing was because like something changed inside.
Yes.
And that was the like, I don't know moments. But instead of like leaning into it and treating it with like grace and beauty as to like the infinite world ahead of us, I thought of it as bad and wrong. Like I should never want to change. I should always want, mint chocolate chip ice cream every single time. So I don't know. The answer is always, I don't know.
And that's okay, because I don't think we ever really know, right?
Yeah.
Like we have these ideas of things we want, and like how beautiful is that, right? And the more I say this all the time, it's like the more we hold on rigidly to these ideas that it has to be a certain way and it always has to be this person, or it always has to be this job, or it always has to be, the more we suffer. Seasons change. We are human. We are part of nature. We're always evolving. Things are going to continue to change. And the more you just let them, again, open palm, let the sand, let the water go, really don't try to grip it, the more you experience the richness of life in all of its colors.
Yeah. It's also, I'm finding it feels very like egotistical to hold on tightly, because there is like way more out there than I can possibly comprehend. And like, what a dick move on my part to be like, nope, I know that this is the best thing for me. And for some people, like, they find that, and that is the best thing for them. But I'm discovering that, like, again, like the next right thing often shows up in my path and be like, oh, wait, this workshop, this sounds really interesting. I don't know anything about this.
Yes.
And there's so much more out there that if I had have stayed on the path, when I was in LA 17 years ago, I never would have found these things that have brought so much color and so much
Yeah.
beauty.
Yeah. And I love that you bring that. There are two things that I really want to, hit home here. It's like the curiosity piece that you brought up, I think. And that's what we talk about with the sugar detox, right? Where it's like
Mm-hmm.
bringing it back to that. This is not a diet. This is
Yeah.
almost nothing to do with food. This is a science experiment on your body, essentially. And this is an opportunity for you to be curious. When I
Yeah.
do this, what happens? When I do that, happens. What happens? And I think if we can always keep that beginner, new, curious mind, we will learn so much more. We will pull more threads, right? We'll be like, what's behind this door? What's behind that door? We'll learn so much more. I think that's so important. And I love, and I believe this, I believe it, right? Where like, what if the thing that is coming into your life is way more beautiful than you can even imagine?
Yeah.
What if it's something you can't even fathom is so great? Why are we so mad that the relationship or the job or whatever didn't work out when there is something else that is far more like, I was so upset for years that my acting career didn't go exactly the way I wanted it to, and it didn't turn into this big thing. But holy shit, I love this so much, what I do. I didn't
Yeah.
know it existed as a job because it didn't, because I had to invent it, right? No, I mean, obviously there are health coaches and whatever. I'm not that special, but like my version of this was unique to me and I didn't know it existed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't know when I was an actor and I could only live in New York or LA that like, that's what I thought. And what would it be like to experience really living in a different country more than a few months, right? And like, what would that look like and how would that be? Felt way more aligned for me. I had no idea life could feel this good and be this beautiful. And let's just always stay open to that possibility that like, if we don't hold on too tightly, we trust ourselves, we take that next step, we take care of ourselves, we're going to continue to be delivered. And we face the hard stuff, right? And,
Yeah.
we work through it. We don't shy away from it. We don't numb, but that life will continue to present things that are like wildly more beautiful than we could imagine.
Yeah. And they're different for each one of us,
Yes.
I mean, again, it's getting rid of like the guilt and the fear of doing it wrong,
Yes.
because again, when I started the very first session with you, I thought that by week 2, obviously I would be ready, to just do whatever the fuck I want. And if on week 2, if I had have been like, oh, well, Liana does Joe Dispenza meditation weekends, I'm going to go do that, I would have shit my pants and died, probably.
No,
because
you'd have been
there
fine.
was none of the like, but I didn't
Framework.
have
Yeah.
it wouldn't have connected with me. I
Yeah.
would have been lost
Yep.
because that was your path and I didn't
Yeah.
have the background of it. So instead of like getting a magic pill like instead of following in someone's footsteps, I learned how to walk on my own. Which
Yes. Oh, maybe that's what I'm doing. Is that what I'm doing? I'm teaching y'all how to walk on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like our little, what are those little play school thingies? Never mind.
I know we don't have kids. We don't know what we're talking about.
We don't know what we're talking about.
The plastic and the walking and the whatever.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful, Laurie.
And again, I mean, I'm going to end up in another one of the group programs because it's just a beautiful experience. And I always like start digging up these new things. I have learned, especially after this one, I've really realized how important it is for me to have time in between them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like as soon as I finished the one, I was like, oh, I need to dive right back in.
Yeah.
I was aware that part of that was my like reflectorism getting caught up in like everybody else's energy about it and being like, oh, I have to keep this rolling. When in actuality, it's really been amazing for me to be like, ooh, okay, I need to take a minute and I need to use this and see where it takes me.
Yes.
And then where it takes me, I have a feeling will inevitably lead me back to another group because it's
You'll
just
have
such
it. You'll
a
uncover
gorgeous
a next
way.
level.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous way
Yeah.
to work through it. And like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we end every episode asking people the question in the title. You know, we always talk about this in the group, right? We have a choice. When life throws us those curveballs, we could suffer through or love through. And what is your favorite tool that you have cultivated through the group or just on your own, that when you get handed a shit sandwich from life, that you are allowed to pivot, and you know, it helps you regulate yourself, it helps you have perspective, it helps you move through? What is that?
For me, it comes back to really grounding myself. And my three main ways of doing that. Well, I guess it's two main ways of doing that, and then one other technique entirely. Breathing, like
Breath work.
consciously stopping and breathing, whether it's doing a specific technique or just like just focus on in and out. Like that's huge. I also find it really helpful to like, I find visualization really helpful. So,
Great.
grounding, you know, standing and imagining the roots coming out of my feet is such an important thing that I use almost daily. And then, you know, the last time that I really like lost the thread on myself, completely dysregulated, we talked during that, and what got thrown in my path right afterwards was a second listening of the Untethered Soul, and the continual talk in there about just opening your heart and letting go. And so I have a visualization of, you know, the window opening with the curtains blowing outward over the ocean, and then also that. Of like bicycle handles, like old school 70s bicycle handles, that when I take my hands off, like the streamers start to blow. And so I use those a lot to just find my way back to me, which then helps me better to deal with the world around me.
Yeah, beautiful. And you're talking about getting, you know, going from getting out of dysregulation, right? Getting out of feeling triggered, whatever we're going to call it. And like, we cannot make decisions. We cannot communicate. We cannot do things from that space. And that is like one of the most powerful tools. Or you have a handful of really powerful tools to get back there, because that's where clarity comes from.
Yeah. And even not being triggered, even sometimes like just on a random Tuesday night, I'm like, you know what? I just really need to like ground back into myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I love those. Laurie, thank you so much for being brave and stepping outside of your comfort zone to do this and to find your voice. And I had a really hard time feeling like I had permission to, like, it was a long time in the making, this podcast for me as well, or just in general. It was so scary to put out that program. Even I'd been working in this industry for years, and I'd healed my own body and all of this stuff. And it was like, well, who am I? Who am I to tell anyone anything? And so I want to acknowledge you for being brave and being on this path of reclamation, of like, you know, like really reclaiming your voice. And in that you will find, you know, obviously, right, you're being drawn to that, the next thing for you, whatever that is. And I do want to remind you that you are a powerful success story and just an example of some beautiful, intentional, conscious human who is moving forward, doing the very best she can to create a life that is aligned and happy for her. And that's, you know, what we can hope for anyone. That's the only thing we can hope for and wish for everyone. So like, you're nailing it.
Aw, thanks.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I know it doesn't feel like it sometimes when we don't know and we're in it, but like, you're doing it. You're nailing it. Like, you're a really a beautiful example. So thank you for coming on and opening up, because I know not everyone likes to talk about themselves. I don't understand it, but
yeah, some of us weird.
Some of us don't want people to know that their lives aren't working out and they're failing and they get sweaty on the weird. I share the weirdest stuff on here. I'm like, the further into this I get, I'm like, oh God, vulnerability hangovers. But Thank you for being brave, because not
Thank you for
everyone's
having me,
a
my
crazy
love.
person.
And thank you, Claire.
I'll be excited to have you back whenever that feels right for you.
All right.
All
It's a
right.
date.
All right. Send you so much love. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you.